The child did her exact gesture. 4 years old, lost in a sea of black tailoring and crystal. June pressed her thumb flat against her opposite wrist and went still. I knew that stillness. I had spent 4 years pretending I didn't. Tassi had brought her out to meet the new director. June said, "Are you my other one?" And I was already moving across the room when I saw the woman at the family table go still in the exact same way. Left thumb pressed flat to a thin steel watch band. Soren Cade looked at my daughter's eyes. Cool slate. Her own. Then she looked at me. The quartet kept playing. The whole room narrowed to one fact. She had just done the math. Let me back up. 4 years ago, on the worst night of my life, Soren Cade stood in our doorway with her coat already on and said the lie I would carry the longest. I'm still here.
Hi everyone! Thank you for staying with me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Stay close, stay connected.
She said it the way she said everything. Short, complete, surgical, her voice never rising. She said it with her left thumb pressed flat against the band of her watch. Gone still. I did not know yet that stillness was a tell. I thought it was calm. I learned later it was the opposite. It was everything she was holding back from breaking. She left before dawn. I want to say something first before I tell you the rest. I did not chase her. I did not call. I am a careful person by trade. I mend things. Water-ruined ship logs and ledgers, and the brittle letters families surrender to the museum when someone dies. I spend my days so when she went, I did the only thing my hands knew how to do. I cataloged the damage. I made a list of what was gone and what remained. What remained was a chipped pale blue enamel cup. She had drunk from it that last morning and set it on the windowsill of my studio, and somewhere in the leaving she forgot it, or left it, I never learned which. There was a hairline crack down one side. I should have thrown it out. Instead, I filled the crack myself, the way I fill the seams in 200-year-old paper, and I put it back on the sill, and I did not look at it directly for a very long time. The room was very quiet then. It is quiet now, remembering. I learned why she left only in pieces, much later. A family collapse. Her late mother's debts called in. The Cade holdings about to be seized. A relative with reach using the one thing Soren could not protect. Stay, and they come for what you love. She believed leaving was the shape protection took. She believed I would be safer with the hole where she had been. She was wrong by a margin she could not have measured. And the measure of it was this. 9 days after she vanished, I found out I was carrying her pup. I sat with that for a moment. Then I sat with it for 9 months. By the time I knew, there was no line left to reach her on. New city, sealed contact, a name folded into the restructured family foundation, like a stone dropped into deep water. I tried, in the early weeks, in the stubborn way you try a door you already know is locked. Then I stopped trying, not because I forgave it, because I had a child to make. And grief is a luxury that asks for both your hands, and I needed mine. So I built a life from nothing, in a flat over the conservation studio, with a window that looked at fog. Her name is June, June Sail. She has Soren's eyes, cool slate, the exact gray of harbor water under cloud, and she does not know it. She collects smooth gray pebbles in her coat pocket and grips a crayon too hard and calls anyone tall the tall one. She has a faint scent I would know anywhere. Cedar and cold rain, a child's version of a thing I have spent 4 years not naming aloud. And when she concentrates, or when she is fighting not to cry, she presses her thumb flat against her opposite wrist and goes completely still. She learned that from no one. June has no watch. She presses bare skin. I used to watch her do it and feel the floor tilt, because I knew exactly whose stillness it was, and I had told no one, not my family, not Margot, who carried me through the first year with kind of unsentimental mercy I will never repay, not June, who is too young to hold it, The whole town assumed her other parent was simply gone, the way parents go, and I let them assume. Margot knew anyway. She always did. "The child has her stillness, Marin," she told me once, low, in the archive between the shelves. "You can mend a ledger. You cannot mend a lie by keeping it." I touched my hair clip the way I do when I am bracing. And I said nothing because there was nothing safe to say. Then, a month ago, the foundation letterhead changed. I was opening the morning mail at the long table when I saw the name printed clean across the top, under the new restoration grant. Director, incoming, Soren Cade. The woman who would, from that page forward, sign the checks that funded my department. The woman who had spent 4 years becoming powerful, clearing the debts, rebuilding the wreck of the foundation, neutralizing the relative who once made her run, and who was, that letterhead told me, coming home to Pearl Harbor, coming to the museum, coming, though I did not let myself finish the thought, into a room I would be standing in. I read the name 3 times. The paper did not change. I set it down very carefully, the way you set down something you are afraid will tear. What happened next was very small. I went home that evening, and I looked, for the first time in a long time, directly at the chipped blue cup on the sill. The crack I had filled with my own hands. The one thing of hers that stayed. I had been mending it all along. The child did her exact gesture again. I want you to understand what happened next, the way I lived it, which is to say slowly, because that is the cruelty of recognition. It does not arrive all at once. It arrives the way water finds a crack in a hull, patiently, and then everywhere. Tassie had June by the hand. June, 4 years old, in the second-hand coat she refused to take off even indoors, her pockets heavy with the gray pebbles she collected like other children collect feelings. Tassie was beaming. She had no idea. She was 22 and bright, and she had decided, with the unguarded kindness of the young, that the new director should meet the staff's children, and that the staff's children should not be hidden away upstairs with a sitter who did not exist. "Come meet the tall one," Tassie said to her, leading her toward the family table. June did not want to. I saw it from across the room. She slowed her feet. She did the thing she does in a crowd, the thing she has always done and that no one taught her. She pressed her thumb flat against the inside of her opposite wrist and went very still, as if she could make herself smaller by holding her own pulse. And at the family table, the woman who had just been seated there pressed her left thumb flat against the band of a thin steel watch and went still in exactly the same way. I have spent 4 years cataloging that gesture in miniature. The small wrist, the bitten-down concentration. I taught myself not to flinch when June did it, because to flinch would be to admit where it came from. And I had decided long ago not to live in that house anymore. I had never once seen them do it at the same time. The quartet kept playing, something with a cello in it, low and unhurried. The kind of music that is designed to make rich people feel that their evening has meaning. 200 guests, Crystal throwing the chandelier into 100 small fires across the harbor windows. And in the middle of it, a 4-year-old and a 33-year-old, strangers to each other, holding their own wrists. Soren Cade looked at my daughter. I watched her do it in stages. First the gesture. I saw her register it the way you register a word in a language you used to speak. A flicker. Then the eyes. June looked up at her, the way children look up at tall things, chin tilted, mouth a little open, and Soren went absolutely motionless because June's eyes are her eyes. Cool slate, the color of the harbor in February. I had looked into those eyes every morning for 4 years and told myself they were only a color. And then, this is the part I will not forget, Soren breathed in. She breathed in the way you do when you are trying to be sure of something. Once, through the mouth, slow, and I knew what she was finding. Cedar and cold rain, faint, a child's version of it. The scent I had scrubbed at and given up scrubbing at because it is part of her, and you cannot wash a child of herself. Soren Cade did the math in front of 200 people. I saw the moment it finished. There is a particular stillness that is not calm. It looks like calm. It is the opposite of calm. It is a person holding a whole collapsing house up with the flat of one thumb. Her thumb pressed harder against the watch. The millimeter at the corner of her mouth, the one I used to chart like weather, pulled and did not move. She did not stand up suddenly. She did not reach. She did not make a sound. That was the thing about her, the thing I had once loved and then learned to fear. Soren never raised her voice. Not once. In all the time I knew her. The night she left, she said the worst thing in the world to me at the volume of someone reading a grocery list. And now, in a room designed for spectacle, she made no spectacle at all. She simply went still over the truth like a surgeon, going still over the place where she will have to cut. I started moving. You learn things, raising a child alone, that no one prepares you for. You learn that your body will cross a room before your mind has finished a sentence. I was already walking. I had my hand out before I knew I had decided anything. And the only thought in me, clean and total, was, get her out of the line of sight. Because it was not only Soren who had been watching. There was a woman 3 tables over, older, in gray, with the particular flat attention of someone who is paid to attend. I had clocked her earlier without knowing why, the way you clock a draft in a sealed room. She had Cade written all over her, in the way she sat, in the way she cataloged the exits. One of the old associates. One of the faction that had once made my bond a thing to be leveraged. That had made Soren believe the only way to keep me safe was to disappear. I had heard enough 4 years ago, in the days before the door closed, to know what those people were. And I watched that gray woman watch my daughter do the gesture, watch her tilt her chin up at Soren, watch the resemblance arrange itself, and I saw her take out her phone. A child with that lineage, a single mother Omega. The math she was doing was a different math. And it was the math that could take June from me. The room did not narrow then. It widened. It became enormous and full of phones. "Come here, baby," I said. And I crouched and June came, the way she always comes to me, without question, the pebbles knocking in her pocket. I put my body between her and the table. I felt her small hand find the inside of her own wrist again, and I covered it with mine so she would not have to hold her own pulse, because that was my job. That had been my job for 4 years, and I had never once been late. June said into my shoulder, very quietly, "The tall one has rain in her coat." "I know," I said. "I know she does." And above me, over the cello, over the crystal, I heard Soren Cade say one word. She said it the way she said my name in the only good years I have ever had. Low, complete, a whole sentence in one breath, as if she had been saving it. Marin. I did not turn around. I want you to know that. I had imagined, in 4 years of nights, what I would do if I ever heard that voice say my name again, and in every version I turned around. In the real one, I did not. I picked up my daughter, who is heavier now than people think and lighter than my arms remember, and I settled her on my hip, and I felt her tuck her face into my neck where she has always fit, and I walked her toward the doors with the harbor fog pressing gray against the glass, and 200 people not quite sure yet what they had seen. Behind me, the quartet did not stop. That is the thing about a room like that. It is built to keep playing. I heard her say it once more, quieter, and that was worse. Marin. I kept walking. June's pebbles knocked together with each step. A small, dull music, the only sound I let myself listen to. What happened next was very small. At the door, June lifted her head and looked back over my shoulder at the woman she did not know, and she did her gesture one last time, thumb to wrist, and she said, in the way children say the truest things by accident, June said, "Are you my other one?" I did not let her see my face. I have a great deal of practice at not letting her see my face. I pushed the door, and the cold harbor air came in, cedar and rain and mud, and I carried my daughter out into it. The room was very quiet behind us by then. Even the cello had finally stopped. Let me back up. Soren came to the studio the next day in the afternoon, when the fog had not yet lifted off the harbor. I heard the bell over the front door, and I knew it was her before I turned. There is a particular economy to the way she crosses a threshold. She does not fill a doorway so much as decide it. I had 4 years to forget that. I had not forgotten it. I did not stop working. I had a water-stained ledger open under the lamp, the 1911 cargo book, and I kept my pale, freckled hands flat on the page where they belonged. My voice goes quieter when I am most upset, not louder. So I said very quietly that June was with Margot. She said, "I know." I asked her first. I sat with that for a moment. She had asked Margot. She had not assumed she could see the child. She had asked the woman who held the door for me the first year, and she had been told no, and she had come anyway. To me, not to June. The order of it mattered. I noted the order of it the way I note everything. The chipped blue cup was on the windowsill between us. I had not moved it that morning. I did not move it now. She did not sit. I had not offered. She stood with her charcoal coat still on, the one that reads dark green when the light goes flat, and she pressed her left thumb against the band of her watch and went still, surgical. The exact stillness my daughter does against her own bare wrist when she is keeping something down. I had spent 4 years watching a small version of that gesture across a kitchen table and telling myself it came from nowhere. It came from the woman standing in my studio. I said her name, Soren, just the one word. It cost me more than the rest of the sentence would have. I told her how this was going to go, if it was going to go at all. June comes first, before the bond, before her, before me, before any apology that wanted to do the work of 4 years in an afternoon. June would not be told who she was looking at until I decided she was ready, and I would decide it. And no one else. There would be no claim, not by blood, not by bond, not by the old law that lets an alpha put a hand on what she believes is hers. June was not hers by right. June was a person I had carried alone and fed alone and stayed awake for alone, and the word right did not enter this room. I said all of it without raising my voice. She listened the way she does everything, completely, without flinching. Her eyes that same cool slate I see every morning over breakfast. When I finished, the room was very quiet. She did not defend herself. That is the part I had not let myself expect. She said, "I left. I won't pretend I didn't." She said it plainly. The way you state a fracture. Not I had reasons. Not you don't understand what was coming for us. She had reasons. I would learn them later, and they were real, and they still did not give me back a single one of those nights. She knew that. I watched her know it. I asked her the only question that mattered to me then. I asked if she had known. About June. She said no. Her thumb moved once on the watch band and went still again. She said she had cut every line so clean that there had been no thread left for the news to travel down. She said it as an accounting of her own doing, not a defense. She said, "If I had known, I would have come back." And then, "And this is the thing I keep," she said. "And I have no way to prove that to you, so I won't ask you to believe it." I did not believe it. Not yet. But I marked that she did not ask me to. I slid the papers across to her. Not the ledger, the terms. I had written them out at the long table at 5 that morning, in my own hand, while June slept and the cup sat where it always sits. Supervised, child-led, slow, if at all. No overnight. No public outings until I said. Nothing about money, nothing about her name, nothing she could use. A plain page. I set it where the lamplight fell. She took the uncapped fountain pen from her inside pocket. She never caps it loudly. She did not now. She read every line. She did not negotiate one of them. She signed at the bottom, and her hand was steady. And I hated, a little, how steady it was. Because steadiness is what I had needed in the doorway 4 years ago, and had not gotten. She set the pen down. She did not reach across the table. She did not reach for me. There were perhaps 8 inches between my hand and hers on the wood, and she held the whole 8, and so did I. She said, "Thank you for telling me your terms. Not thank you for letting me see her." I had not let her yet. She understood the difference and named the right one. She stood to boo at the door. She stopped, the way she always stopped, and I braced for the line, the one she said the night she left, the lie I have carried longer than anything. "I'm still here." I waited for her to spend it cheaply. She did not say it. She looked at the cup on the sill, and I saw her recognize it, saw her understand that I had kept it, that I had filled its crack with my own hands, that it had been on that windowsill through every one of the years she was gone. Something in her mouth moved, a single millimeter at the corner, and held. She said only, "I'll wait to hear from you." Then she went out into the fog, and the bell rang once behind her, and I stood very still over the open ledger, my thumb pressed flat to my own wrist without my deciding it, keeping something down. The first week, she came on a Tuesday. I want to be exact about that, because exactness was the only thing I had control over. She did not arrive unannounced. She had Tassie call ahead, and Tassie called me, breathless and apologetic, to ask if it was all right. And I said it was because I had set the terms myself and I would not be the one to break them. Soren Cade came to the studio at 4 in the afternoon, when the fog was already coming in off the harbor, and she stood in the doorway the way she had stood in our doorway 4 years ago. Except now she had no coat already on, no lie already packed. She had a paper bag from the bakery on Coldwater Street. She did not bring flowers. She brought, for June, a small box of colored chalk, the thick kind a child's hand can hold without snapping. She set it on the long table and did not push it toward anyone. She let it sit there. June circled it twice. Then she pressed her thumb flat against her wrist and went still, deciding. And I watched Soren watch her do it. And I watched Soren's own thumb find the band of her watch and stop. 2 people in one room holding the same thing down. Neither of them knew they were doing it. I knew. I have spent 4 years being the only one who knew things. The room was very quiet. Then June said the tall one could draw the boat in the window. And that was all. That was the whole permission. Soren got down on the floor. Not the chair, the floor, which I had not asked for and had not expected. And she drew a boat in gray chalk that was, I noticed, an accurate boat. A real hull, a real water line. And June corrected the number of windows, and Soren changed it without argument. She did not look at me once during the drawing. I understood that this was discipline, not indifference. She had decided somewhere that the child came first and the rest came never, or came so slowly it might as well be never. And she was holding to it with the surgical patience I remembered and had taught myself to stop missing. She left after 50 minutes. She did not ask to come back. At the door, she said only, "Thank you, Marin." And then she was gone into the fog, and I stood at the window with the chipped blue cup in my 2 hands, and I did not drink from it. I just held it. I had been holding it, in one way or another, for 4 years. The second week, she learned the pebbles. This was not something I told her. June keeps smooth gray pebbles in her coat pocket, harbor stones worn flat, and she sorts them on the table by some private logic only she understands, by which one is the mother, and which one is the small one, and which one is sleeping. Most adults try to play along and get it wrong, and June forgives them, because she is 4, and the world is full of people who get her wrong. Soren did not try to play along. She watched. She watched the way she once watched a ledger for the single transposed figure that broke the column. And after a long while, she picked up one pebble, the second smallest, and set it, not where June had it, but slightly apart. And she said, "This one went out on the water." June went very still. Then she nodded, slow and grave, as if a thing she had always known had finally been said by someone else. And she moved the pebble back gently and said, "It came home." And Soren said, "Good. Just that. Good." I had to turn and face the shelving for a moment. I straightened ledgers that did not need straightening. The bergamot and ink of my own workbench, the cedar and rain coming off the woman on my floor. I cataloged it the way I catalog everything, to keep from being inside Cedar and rain. The same scent I had spent 4 years smelling faintly on my own child, and telling myself I was imagining. I was not imagining it. I have stopped being able to pretend I was. When she stood to go, she was careful, always, to stand on the far side of the table from me, 8 inches more than she needed. A perimeter she kept without being told, the way she had once kept appointments and promises, and then one single time had not. I noticed the 8 inches. I noticed she made them deliberate. That was the difference, I think, between then and now. Then she had taken the distance and called it protection. Now she gave me the distance and let me decide what to do with it. She said, "Same time next week if it suits you." I said it suited me. I said it the way you agree to a thing you have already decided and want to sound like you are still deciding. Damn, the 3rd week. The fog did not lift all day, and the harbor light came through the studio window the color of weak tea, and I had a water-damaged passenger manifest open under the lamp. 1911, the ink bled and feathered where the sea had gotten in. I was lifting the page when she came in, and June ran to the window to count the boats she could not see through the fog, and Soren stopped behind me. Not close, never close, and looked down at the ruined manifest. She said, "You can read that." I said, "Some of it." I said, "You learn to read what's left." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very low, almost not to me, "You always could." And there it was, the thing under the calm surfacing for 1 second, the way a hull shows through fog and is gone. She didn't. Her hand was on the edge of my workbench, near my own hand, near enough that I could see the thin steel watch and the thumb pressed flat against the band, holding something down. And for one suspended moment, neither of us moved, and the fog pressed at the glass, and June counted invisible boats, 3, 4, 5, and the inch of air between her hand and mine was the loudest thing in the room. I did not cross it. She did not cross it. What happened next was very small. She took her hand off the bench. She stepped back to her 8 inches. She went and got down on the floor and asked June which boat had come home today. And June told her, and the moment closed over like water over a stone. And I went back to the manifest, and my own thumb was pressed flat to my wrist, and I let it stay there, and I let the page dry, and I did not say the thing I almost said. Margot found me afterward when Soren had gone and June was asleep in the back room under my coat. She looked at the chalk boat still on the table, the corrected windows, and she looked at me a long time the way she had looked at me through the whole first terrible year. She said, "The child has her stillness, Marin." I said I knew. She said, "You can mend a ledger." She let that sit. She did not finish it. She had finished it once before and did not need to again. She put her hand on my shoulder, brief and warm, and she gathered her things and left me alone with the cup and the fog and the small gray pebbles sorted on the table. The mother, the small one, the one that went out on the water and came home. I picked up the second smallest and held it in my palm. It was cold and smooth, and it fit there like it had been made to. I put it back where June had it. Then I stood at the window for a long time in the dark, holding the cup I had mended with my own hands, and I let myself feel, for exactly the length of one held breath, how much easier it would be to let her in, and how I was not going to. Not yet, not by right, not because of any bond, not until I had watched her choose it more times than she had chosen to leave. She had chosen to come back 3 Tuesdays in a row. I was counting. I am always counting. It is the only way I know how to be sure. The child kept the pebble in her left hand the whole drive home. I watched her in the mirror at the red lights, the way she had closed her fingers around it, the small fist she made, and I knew it was the gray one she had chosen at the harbor that afternoon. The smoothest of the 4 in her pocket. June did not collect pebbles to keep them. She collected them to give them away. I had learned this slowly, the way I learned everything about her, by watching and not asking. She gave them to people she had decided to trust. She had given one to Margot in her first year of talking. She had given one to Tassie after the gala, which surprised me because the gala had frightened her. She had not given one to anyone since. When we got home, she set the gray pebble on the windowsill beside the chipped blue cup, and she did not explain. I want you to understand what that windowsill was to me. It was the smallest shelf in the flat, paint peeling at the corner, and on it lived the two things I could not throw away: the cup that Soren had drunk from the morning she left, and now a pebble my daughter had chosen for a woman she called the Tall One. I stood in the kitchen with the kettle going cold, and I looked at the two objects sitting an inch apart, and I felt something I did not have a clean word for. I sat with that for a moment. She came on the 4th Tuesday and the 5th. I will not pretend the weeks were dramatic. They were not. They were small, and the smallness was the whole point. Soren learned the rules of my studio the way she had once learned the rules of a thing she meant to keep. She knocked. She waited for me to open the door rather than the bell announcing her. She sat on the low stool by the long table, not the chair, because the chair put her above June, and the stool put her below, and she had worked this out herself on the second visit without a word from me. She brought nothing the child could not refuse. No toys, no sweets. Once, a single smooth river stone she had found on the south breakwater, which she set on the table and did not push toward June, and which June considered for 11 minutes before she took it and added it to her pocket. And Soren pressed her thumb flat to her watch band and went still, and I understood she was keeping down something very large. The slate eyes. I caught them on each other across the table that afternoon, the woman's and the child's, the exact same cool gray, and I made myself look at the ledger I was mending instead. Margot came in while Soren was on the floor. That was the thing I had not expected, that she would learn to be on the floor. She had been 4 years ago a woman who sat very straight in rooms. Now she folded herself down onto the studio boards where June was arranging her pebbles in a line by size, and she did not touch them, and she did not arrange them better. She only watched. And once she said very quietly that one is the same gray as the harbor in November. And June looked at her with great seriousness and moved it to the front of the line. Margot stood in the doorway with 2 cups of tea she had made without being asked, and she watched the two of them on the floor, and she did not say anything until Soren had gone. Then she said, "The child has her stillness, Marin." I said, "I know." She set my tea down by the open page. She said, "You cannot mend a lie by keeping it." And then, because she was Margot and she had carried me through a year, "I do not let myself remember in full." She added, more gently, "You are not keeping it anymore. That part is over. The question now is the other one." I asked her what the other one was. She said, "Whether you will let yourself have the thing you survived without." I did not answer her. I pressed my thumb flat to my wrist without deciding to, the way I do, and Margot saw it, and the corner of her mouth moved, not unkindly, and she drank her tea and went back to the front desk and left me with the page and the silence and the windowsill, where the cup and the pebble sat an inch apart. It was not addressed to me. It was addressed to the foundation, to the office of the incoming board director. And Tassie brought it back to me because Tassie, who is 22 and unguarded and has never in her life learned to leave a thing alone, had recognized the name of the firm on the envelope and gone quiet in a way I had not seen her go quiet before. She said, "This came from Ms. Cade." She said, "I think you should know about it before she does." Then she said the name of the firm, and then she said the word that turned the afternoon cold: guardianship. I have a great deal of practice at not letting my face move. I took the envelope and I held it the way you hold a ledger you are afraid will tear, and I did not open it because it was not mine to open. But I did not need to open it. I knew the firm. I had heard the name of it 4 years ago, in the worst week, said in a low voice through a door I was not supposed to be listening at. It belonged to the faction, to the relative whose debts and threats had emptied our doorway one night before dawn. The associate had been at the gala. I had seen him, a thin man near the windows, and I had told myself he was nobody. And I had been wrong, the way you are wrong about the thing you most need to be wrong about. They had clocked the lineage. 200 people had watched a 4-year-old do an alpha's exact gesture, had watched her slate eyes find the new director's slate eyes across a family table, and someone in that room had done the same math Soren did, and had reached for the only weapon that math could load, a powerful alpha lineage, surfacing in the child of a single mother Omega. There are people for whom that is not a love story. There are people for whom that is leverage. I set the envelope down on the long table, very carefully, beside the cup I had mended with my own hands. What happened next was very small. Tassie put her hand on my shoulder, just for a moment, the unguarded girl who had lit the fuse without meaning to, and she said she was sorry. And I told her she had nothing to be sorry for, and I meant it because the fuse had been laid 4 years ago, and she had only stumbled across it in the dark. Then I sent her home, and I locked the studio, and I went up to the flat, and I stood in my daughter's doorway and watched her sleep, with the gray pebble in her left fist, the one she had set on the windowsill and then taken back, because she had not decided yet. And I thought, with a calm that frightened me more than panic would have, that I would burn the foundation to the waterline before I let anyone take her. I did not call Soren that night. I want to be honest about that. My first instinct, the one 4 years of carrying it had built into me, was to handle it alone, to tell no one, to become very small, and very fast, and very invisible the way I had once before. I sat at the kitchen table with the unopened envelope I should not have taken, and I made a list in my head of the things I would need, the flat I could disappear into, the firm of my own I could not afford, and I got all the way to the end of the list before I understood that the list was 4 years old. It was the list of a woman who had no one. I was not sure anymore that I was that woman. I looked at the windowsill, the cup, the pebble, an inch apart. In the morning I called her. She answered on the first ring, the way you answer when you have been keeping the line clear. I told her there was a letter. I told her the name of the firm. There was a silence on the other end that I had never heard from her. Not a surgeon's silence. Something underneath it. And then she said one word, and the word was my name. Said the way she had said it across the gala. And I closed my eyes and held the windowsill in my mind. She said, "Don't open it, I'm coming." She said, "Marin." She said, "I won't let them." And I stood in the cold kitchen with the morning fog at the glass, and I did not say "still here," though the 2 words were in my mouth, because she had not earned them yet, and I had not decided yet, and the deciding was the only thing left that was entirely mine. The Crisis Act. June's lineage is now semi-public, and the old faction moves on guardianship. Implied danger only. Soren shields them at real cost while Marin chooses the harder, honest path. Continuing in Aria's voice, holding the perimeter until Act 8. The letter came in a window envelope. I knew before I opened it. There is a particular weight to paper that means to take something from you. And I have spent my whole life learning the weight of paper. June was at the low table with her pebbles, sorting them by gray, and I stood by the door with the envelope in my hand, and I did not let her see my face. It was not a threat. That is the thing about people with money and lawyers. They do not threaten. They inquire. A firm I did not recognize, on behalf of a name I did, was making preliminary inquiries into the welfare and guardianship circumstances of a minor child, given recent disclosures regarding the child's lineage. Recent disclosures. The reunion. 200 people and a child with slate eyes who pressed her thumb to her wrist. And somewhere in that room, one of the old associates had done his own arithmetic and carried it back to the faction that had once used me as a pressure point against the woman I loved. They had not wanted June when she was only mine. They wanted her now that she was also a Cade. I read the name 3 times. The paper did not change. What happened next was very small. I folded the letter back along its creases, and I put it in the drawer where I keep the things I cannot throw away. And I knelt down beside the low table, and I asked June which gray was her favorite. She held up a flat one, worn smooth, the color of the harbor under fog. She said it was the quiet one. I said it was the quiet one too. Margot found me at the studio that night, after June was asleep upstairs, and I had come back down to stand over a ledger I was not repairing. She did not ask what was wrong. She read the drawer the way she reads water damage from the warp of the thing. She put the kettle on. She set the chipped blue cup at my place without a word, and I held it in both hands and did not drink. "The child has her stillness, Marin," Margot said. "You knew this day might come the moment her name appeared on that letterhead." I said I had hoped to choose the day myself. "You don't choose the day," she said. "You choose what you do in it." The fog was at the window. It is always at the window in Pearl Harbor, but that night it pressed close, the way it does before it lifts, and I stood with the cup going cold in my hands, and I understood that the hardest thing was not the faction. The hardest thing was that there was a way out of this that I could take alone, and a way through it that I could not. And the difference between them was Soren. I could run. I had run before, in a sense. I had built a whole life out of staying very still and asking nothing of anyone. I could take June and disappear into a smaller town and let the inquiries chase a single mother with no famous name attached and watch them lose interest. I could keep her entirely mine. The faction wanted the Cade lineage. If I severed it, I severed their claim. But to do that, I would have to keep Soren out. Not for a season. For good. I would have to make June's father a closed door again, and I would have to be the one who closed it this time. I sat with that for a moment. I had spent 4 years refusing to claim Soren by right, refusing the bond, refusing the easy version of forgiveness. I had told myself this was strength. But there is a kind of pride that wears the same coat as protection. And I had to ask myself, with the cup cold in my hands and my daughter asleep above me, which one I was holding. I called her. She answered on the first ring, the way she had every time, as if she kept the phone in her hand now, as if she had been keeping it in her hand for 4 years and only recently been given a reason to answer. I read her the letter. I did not soften it. I said the name of the firm and the name behind it, and I heard her go still on the other end, the surgical stillness, and I knew without seeing her that her thumb had found the band of her watch. The room was very quiet. She said, "Don't open it. I'm coming." She said, "Marin," she said, "I won't let them." And I stood in the cold kitchen with the morning fog at the glass, and I did not say "still here," though the 2 words were in my mouth, because she had not earned them yet, and I had not decided yet, and the deciding was the only thing left that was entirely mine. She did not come to the studio with lawyers. She came alone the next morning in the charcoal coat that read dark green in the harbor light, and she stood in my doorway the way she had stood in it 4 years ago, except that this time she did not have her coat already buttoned to leave. She told me what she was going to do before she did it, which I think now was the most careful thing she had ever done, because she was giving me the chance to stop her. The faction wanted leverage, she said. They wanted the lineage because the lineage came attached to an inheritance, the restructured estate, the holdings she had spent 4 years clawing back from the wreck, the very thing that had made her powerful enough to come home. As long as June stood to inherit it, June was worth contesting. A child worth millions is a child worth taking. So she was going to make June worth nothing to them. She was going to sign the inheritance away, not into trust, not into some clever instrument a better lawyer could unwind. Away, into the foundation, irrevocably, the museum's restoration endowment, and 3 others, scattered past recall, with a clause naming June ineligible to benefit. She was going to make her own daughter a disinheritance on paper so that no one would ever again look at her and see a fortune wearing a child's face. I said she would be giving up everything she had rebuilt. She said she had rebuilt it to make the world safe for someone she had not known existed. She said it had done its job. I said the faction would still know June was hers. Blood does not unsign. They will know, she said. But there is nothing in it for them. People like that do not fight for love. They fight for what they can hold. Take away the holding, and they go find an easier table. She took the uncapped fountain pen out of her inner pocket, the same pen she had signed my terms with, in the same room weeks ago, accepting every condition I set without defense. She set the documents on my work table, between the ledgers, beside the chipped blue cup, and she did not ask me to thank her, and she did not ask me to forgive her, and she did not say that this made us even, because she knew it did not, and she would never say it did. She said only, "I should have been here. I'm signing this because I wasn't." And she signed. I watched her hand move, and I saw, for the first time, the whole distance between the woman who had left and the woman in my studio. The woman who left had believed that removing herself was the same as protecting me. She had been wrong, catastrophically, in a way that cost me 4 years, and cost June a father. The woman signing did not remove herself. She put herself between my daughter and the thing that wanted her, and she paid the entire price, and she stayed in the room to do it. That was the difference. It had always been the difference. I had just never been given the chance to see it before. When she finished, she capped the pen quietly, the way she did everything quietly, and she pressed her thumb flat to the band of her watch and went still, holding something down and upstairs. Not knowing, my daughter was waking, and I heard the small, particular sound of her feet finding the floor. I did not say still here, but I moved the cup across the table, closer to Soren's hand, and she looked at it, and she understood. It was not forgiveness. It was the first thing. The harder path was the honest one, and the honest one ran straight through the woman I had spent so long keeping out. I had decided. I was not going to run. I was going to let her stand between us and the world, and I was going to stand beside her while she did it. And I was going to tell June the truth about her eyes when June was old enough to ask it plainly, and none of it would erase what she had done. It would only be true. She said my name once, the way she said it when there was too much to say. Marin. I said, "I know." Upstairs, the small feet reached the top of the stairs. The room had finally given me back to myself. June was asleep 2 doors down, in Margot's spare room, the one with the ship in a bottle on the dresser she had decided was hers. I had checked twice. The smooth gray pebble was in her left hand even in sleep. The fist closed around it the way she closed her hand around everything she had decided to keep. I came back down the narrow stairs, and Soren was standing where I had left her, by the studio window, the fog gone thin against the glass for the first time in days. She had not sat down. She had not touched anything. The chipped blue cup was on the sill between us, where it had been for 4 years. She said, "I can keep coming for as long as you let me. That is all I came to say." I sat with that for a moment. She did not move toward me. Her left thumb found the band of her watch and pressed flat, and she went still, surgically still, the stillness I had spent 4 years teaching myself not to look for in crowds. The same stillness my daughter wore when she was holding something down. I had stopped pretending I did not know where June had gotten it. I said, "You left." She said, "I left." She did not soften it. She did not reach for the night, for the debts, for the relative whose name we did not say, for the lie she had said with her coat already on. She had signed all of that away by now. The leverage, the inheritance, the safe distance, every shield she had built around her own going. She had taken the public hit and asked for nothing. She let the 2 words stand on the floor between us. Bare. "I left," she said again, quieter. "I won't make it smaller than it was." The room was very quiet. What happened next was very small. I picked up the cup. I had filled the crack in it with my own hands one winter, when June was new, and the nights were long, and I could not mend anything else. So I had mended that. I turned it once in the light. Then I set it down on the long table, not the sill, closer to her, on purpose, the first thing of hers I had ever moved back toward her. She looked at it. Something at the corner of her mouth moved, a single millimeter, fuller this time, and held. I said, "I'm not doing this because of the bond." She said, "I know." I said, "I'm not doing this because she has your eyes." She said, "I know that too." I said, I watched you decide to stay and pay for it. I watched you put yourself between us and the thing that wanted to take her and ask me for nothing. That is the only reason. Not what we were. What you did. She did not say anything. The fountain pen was in her coat pocket. I could see the uncapped end of it, the pen she had signed the terms with, the pen she had signed her own protection away with. And her hand had come up halfway toward it the way it did when there was too much to hold, and then stopped, and pressed flat to the watch instead, holding it down, always holding it down. Soren, I said. It was the first time I had said her name to her face in 4 years. I had said it into the dark a great many times. I had said it to a sealed letter that came back unopened. I had never once said it where she could hear it, and the saying of it cost me more than all the terms I had set, more than the closed door, more than the 8 inches I had kept between us week after week, while she sat on my floor and learned the names of my daughter's pebbles. She heard it land. I watched her hear it. I said, "Stop holding it down." For a moment she did not. The discipline was the only thing that had carried her home. I understood that. It had carried me too. We were both of us women who had learned to carry the fire instead of letting it have us. And there is a particular loneliness in being good at that. And I was tired of being good at it across a room from the only person who knew the weight of the same thing. Then her thumb came off the watch. She crossed the floor. She did not hurry. She came the way she did everything. Unhurried, complete, and she stopped close, closer than the 8 inches. And she did not put her hand anywhere I had not already chosen. She waited. Even now, with the room gone warm and the fog thin, and my name still in the air, she waited for me to be the one who closed the last of it. I closed it. My forehead came to rest against hers, and her hand came up at last and held the side of my jaw, her palm cool and certain and shaking very slightly, the only part of her that had ever let me see the shake. The tortoiseshell clip had slipped loose in my hair sometime in the long quiet, and neither of us reached for it. She breathed out. Cedar and cold rain, the scent I had spent 4 years catching wrong on strangers in the street, and I let myself, for the first time, catch it right. She kissed me once, slow and certain, the kind of kiss you give when you have decided something and intend to keep it. Then she drew back just far enough to look at me, her slate eyes wet and steady, and she did not say anything at all, because there was nothing left that needed saying out loud. Upstairs, very faint, a small foot crossed the floor and went quiet again. I did not pull away. I stayed exactly where I was, my forehead against hers, her hand at my jaw, the cup on the table where I had moved it, and I thought about how long a person can hold a perimeter, and how the holding is not the same as the choosing, and how I had finally, on my own terms, in my own time, with my daughter safe 2 doors down, chosen. She said, very low, against me, "I'm not going anywhere." I said, "I know." And I found to my own quiet astonishment that I did. The room had been ours for a long time before it was anyone else's. That is the thing I did not expect, 4 years on. That the studio over the harbor would keep us the way it kept the ledgers, patient, dim, smelling of cedar and old paper, and the rain that never fully left Pearl Harbor. The fog still came to the window most mornings. But it lifted now. It lifted in the afternoons and let the light through onto the long table where we worked, and that was new. And I noticed it the way I notice everything, which is to say I wrote it down somewhere only I could read. June is 5 now. She has a watch. She asked for it the way she asks for everything, sideways, looking at her pebbles. She said she wanted one like the tall ones. So Soren took her to the shop on the brick lane and let her choose, and June chose a small steel band too big for her wrist. And now when she concentrates, she presses her thumb flat against it and goes still. And the gesture that once cracked a room open in front of 200 people is just a thing my daughter does at the kitchen table over a crayon. I sat with that for a moment, the first time I saw it. The tell that gave them away to each other. Now it only gives them to me. I have not forgotten the morning she left. I want to be careful here, because there is an easy version of this where the leaving dissolves, where the years I raised June alone become a thing we smile about, softened. That is not what happened. What she did was real. I told her, in the quiet of act after act of Small Tuesdays, that I would never pretend the door had not closed. She did not ask me to. She has never once asked me to. What happened next was very small. Margot came by on a Sunday with a box of ginger biscuits and her unsentimental eyes, and she watched Soren on the floor with June, the watch off her wrist and set carefully on the table because June was teaching her the pebbles, the gray ones from the seawall, sorted by some logic only a child holds. Margot said low, only to me, "You did not mend the lie. You let it stay broken and built next to it. That is the harder thing." I said, "I know." I said her name in my head and not out loud, which is its own kind of keeping. The chipped blue cup is on the windowsill still. I never made it whole. I thought I would once. I thought the ending of this would be the crack closing, the seam disappearing. But I left the hairline where it is, filled and visible, pale gold now, where I work the repair, and we drink from it anyway. The three of us, passing it hand to hand. Soren drinks from the side with the crack. She does it without saying anything. She has done it every morning for a year. That is the vow, not a word, the side of the cup she chooses. The harbor was clear the evening she finally told me the rest of it, what she had signed away, what it had cost, the long arithmetic of staying. June was asleep 2 doors down. The window held no fog at all, just the lights coming on across the water, and Soren stood at the glass with her thumb flat against a watch that was not there anymore, because she had given hers to a 5-year-old and not bought another. I crossed the room. I put my hand over her bare wrist where the watch used to be, over the stillness she keeps there, and I held it. She did not move for a moment. Then she turned her palm up under my fingers, the way you turn to let someone in who has decided finally on her own to come. The small feet did not reach the stairs this time. The house stayed quiet. The cup waited on the sill. I told her the harbor was clear. She said, "I see it." I said, "Don't leave." She said the 2 words I had not let her earn until I was sure I would believe them. And this time, they were not a lie packed into a code at dawn. This time they were the side of the cup, the watch on a child's wrist, the seam left golden open and ours. She said, "Still here."